Hello, I'm Dr. Vijay Murthy. I'm with Maya Tiwari, who is a humanitarian and the founder of Wise Earth School of Ayurveda. Your program, which is based on Ahimsa, is taught worldwide,
Yes.
and we are doing this series to learn or explore more about the concept of Ahimsa. Ahimsa, which is non-hurt or non-violence. If you have watched the two other webinars that we did, we explored some issues around it. But then it is important to understand that Ahimsa is not an independent value. In the Vedic context, Ahimsa is one of the values within the multitude of values that help one
To live
achieve.
a more conscious life.
What I'd like, Maya Tiwari, for you to actually explain this concept of yajna, because literally it means a sacrificial ritual. And how does this really apply in our modern everyday living?
Well, Vijay, it's nice. Thank you for being here with me again as we continue our exploration of Ahimsa. Ahimsa is the overall umbrella of many values and many virtues. At the very core of Ahimsa, the act of non-hurting, is our understanding of the various conscious practices that keep us in alignment with sentiency or awareness. And so we have looked at Ahimsa and Satyam, truth. What we are really looking at is what is one of the core principles, the core practices that we can do in our everyday life that maintain Ahimsa, and it's Yajna. Yajna is, in terms of Vedic context, the ritual sacrifices that are made in order to keep us in alignment with consciousness, with Mother Nature, with the rhythms, with the cyclical cycles, and so on. But in this context, if we look at Mother Nature, we find that her entire principle of nurturance and nourishment is based on yajna. She sacrifices so many things on a minute-to-minute basis to make it possible for her creatures and species to survive and live happily. You know, from the way that the branches of a tree just bend for us to pick its fruits, to the way that the river itself washes away anything that is toxic there in the environment. She is continually in the act of yajna. And when we human emulate that principle and that practice, we begin to live a life that is in and of itself guided by an innate principle of non-hurt, of self-care, and of mutual care.
So how I see it is that what Maya Tiwari is saying is yajna is almost, it is natural, it's organic. If, like nature, nature sacrifices herself on an every minute basis to make the world a place livable for a lot of lives.
Yes, because we don't see the invisible work. 99% of what Mother Nature does is invisible to humans, not to the animals necessarily, but to humans, because we are caught up in will and activity and karma and motility. So therefore we are not as observant of how nature changes her ways in order to protect us, but she does this in a million ways. She may bring an absolute rainstorm in order to forestall a forest fire. She may, in fact, you know, we in the mountains, when I lived in North Carolina in Pisgah Mountain, where the Wise Earth School was for almost 20 years, we saw how there was a deep freeze when in the middle of the end of winter, then all of a sudden the freeze came because the blackberries had to bloom, or the apple tree later on in May had a cold snap because then the apple tree had to bear its fruits, or during the full moon when you dig a hole in the earth, there isn't enough earth to put back into that hole. Whereas at the other end of the moon, the cyclical moon, there was the same hole dug had extra dirt. And so we began to learn nature in that way, but it was all looking at Mother Nature's sacrifices, what she does, how she does it. Now, this is in terms of the Vedic rishis and seers. They understood that human contribution in a similar way, not just out of gratitude back to Mother Nature, but gratitude to self-care and mutual care, to the care of our communal care, that when we emulate that same principle, it becomes selfless. That act of selflessness, it's not just about handing someone your clothing if you don't need it and whatever. It's not about just discarding the things we don't need. It's about sharing the precious things in our lives in a way that when we, for instance, in sadhana, and yajna is not separate from sadhana, by the way. Sadhana is not a ritual, and yajna in this case is also not a ritual, but it is a routine. It's a conscious routine in the way that we, a mindful routine in the way that we go about. We cook the meal without tasting it. We then offer the first meal, a little bit of it, in a small pot with some camphor lit as fire, or with some ghee, and then light it so that there is the fire is the agni, the assimilation process. It becomes a little puja, but it is really an offering of gratitude to Mother Nature for all that she's giving us, and to bless that food in order that we may digest it properly. If there's any contaminants in it, that it will resolve itself through the incredible yajna of the mind, because it's also more than a physical activity. Yajna is about entraining the mind.
So what you are really saying is, yajna as a ritual is a reminder, or it's symbolic of the sacrifices that nature does for the well-being of the planet. And I also hear that there is an important thing for anybody who's wanting to embrace this value of yajna. Again, doesn't just make it just ritualistic or symbolic, because while it is possible to demonstrate the behavior of symbolic yajna, we may actually forget that we need to exercise it in our everyday life
in order to make it conscious, and in order so to have it become an entrained memory, meaning what will propel us, what will remind us, a reminder to remind us that life has started. But once we become accustomed to this way of living, Vijay, I've been living that way now for more than 40-something years, and then in my childhood as well. What starts to happen is it's automatic. You get into walking and there's a mantra that pops in the mind. And the mantra is in tandem with your gait, however that movement goes. You see someone suffering and immediately, Mahamrityunjaya mantra might come to the mind, which is Triambakaya Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivarnam. That mantra is so powerful, and it immediately comes to the mind before the shock of looking at a scene that is in despair. And the whole understanding, since we've been dealing with ahimsa in food in particular, there is literally thousands of yajna that we can do every season, each season. At the Wise Earth School, we didn't turn over the garden beds necessarily, because we didn't want to upset the earth that much by digging in too deeply. But what we did do is each season had the seasonal flags and a homa, a small fire pit in the middle of the garden that asks for blessing, that offers a few of the seeds, organic seeds that we were about to plant during planting season. and ask for it to be protected. And it usually is the mantra for its season. When the first blueberry starts to bloom, we also have a mantra for that, where we bless the earth, the bush, and the, for its fruit. And life is so very simple, and even if we don't know all the mantras and all the acts, the act of yajna in the mind, that sankalpa, that intent of, I need to offer gratitude and blessings to the plant as it comes up through the earth. It's so beautiful. The garden is not only a living field for ahimsa, our fruit gardens and flower gardens, and whatever. It is actually symbolic of everything that we can do for and with Mother Earth.
From what you are saying, Maya Tibari, is, for me as a physician, I think of, like you explained, the yajna of nature, which is nature's sacrifice for the well-being of the planet. The body also does a very similar thing. Of course, body is part of nature. It's not outside nature. The body does millions and millions of functions in trillions of cells without even us noticing it. So most of the functions in our body are involuntary. Sometimes the body actually shuts some organs in order to keep the rest of the body healthy.
The sacrifice.
Sacrifice. So the sacrifice almost is nature.
The principle is innate. Because if we look even at the dhatus, or the tissue layers of the body, the 7 tissue layers, and the way that the nourishment is fed from tissue to tissue, there is something called a kala. The kala crystal, actually, is what it is, where when the nutrients are pure, that crystal shines, and it's through emitting that light into the next dhatu that it becomes more refined feeding for the next dhatu, that the next dhatu is fed. If the nutrients are in any way contaminated, that crystal, it does not, it's like the crystal hanging in your window in a cloudy day. It doesn't emit that much brilliance to the next tissue. All of our internal function is yajna. And then when we give back to the earth, it's not just waste. We call it malas. Malas, as you know, does not mean waste. Mala is the nutrient that has been informed by the 7 process of tissue transformation in the body through our nutrients, and then that informed substance is meant to go back to the earth to give more sentiency to Mother Earth. That's our gratitude to Mother Earth. It's not supposed to be treated the way that we're treating it. That body is giving back its gratitude. Now the food has been broken down with one X factor, and the X factor is our awareness, the human awareness. When that food goes through the stomach of an animal, it does not have the same sentiency as the human conscious awareness. And so that is our gift back to the earth. In our last session, we were talking about how, we were talking about the emission of the cows down, and so much emission, that's because of poor diet for the poor cows, and the way that they're treated, and the emissions are higher. But even when they're just eating organically on the good earth and grazing and eating grass and buttercups and everything else that grows in each season, that they are able to digest through their own incredible massive transformation of 6 stomachs, I think it is, then when that is used purposefully, that's another gift of theirs to the earth. When it's used to daub our walls and our homes, in time past we all had what is now called straw bale homes or whatever, then it sanitizes it. It's antibacterial, antifungal, so we have so many gifts, but the greatest gift that we can give back is learning what the Vedas have taught us and what many other ancient cultures have taught us in giving back.
Yes, so to actually see the entire process of life as a cycle where everything gets recycled and processed, and that in a form is yajna. However, because in nature and in our body it happens in such an involuntary way, as humans, if we develop awareness, then we can voluntarily actually embrace this value of yajna to do in very small ways what nature does to other humans, to other life forms.
Unwittingly, automatically, it happens that our correlation with each other, our relationship to each other, our response to each other, regardless of angry or hurtful things that may come at us, and that happens. It's the human dynamics. We're at different stages of our lives, and we will not always agree. In fact, we rarely agree on many things, but that's an accepted form. You know, we just accept that I am not agreeing with my neighbor or my friends or the people that I am working with or whatever, but that there is respect for whatever their opinions and journeys are about. That's also a form of yajna, by the way.
Yes, yeah.
Because it is a form of selflessness where you're not into your own, I am right, I'm right, I'm right, and that person then has to be wrong, but we are all in our truth, and that truth is always likely to change.
I think in some ways I can perhaps interpret this as when we are not in agreement with something or someone, exercising kindness is also a form of yajna, because kindness is helping the other person, whereas you are actually not withholding yourself from exercising kindness because you disagree.
Exactly. And when we can get to that point, it shows a huge quantum leap into maturity, because it is not always immediate that kindness comes when we are being rubbed in a way that affects the ego, or which is natural, or affects the thinking. But basically underneath all of it is the human desire to be in harmony with the other, because that is our happiness. Yajna is also what generates happiness. How does selflessness and small, incredible sacrifices that become part of the sadhana of living, the flow of life, how does that generate happiness? You know, we can't buy an ounce of happiness. We cannot go out and buy a bottle of it and drink it. We absolutely, we can't have it by also association with happy people. We need to be able to understand that happiness is not really ever about the abundance of wealth. Happiness is not about the fact that we can buy anything in the world that we want, including the Ferrari and the Lamborghini. Happiness, it comes from that act of having a synchronized harmony with another, especially in a tense area or a tense situation where we could be so disharmonious with each other. And yet, if we understand that, okay, selfless, the sacrifice is not to agree with the person you disagree with, but basically to respect the person that you're disagreeing with, and just hold that in that kind space in the heart. And that's really a sacrifice, because you have to work emotionally to get there very, very quickly, so that we don't lengthen the misery or we don't lengthen the tension, because truth is also yajna, offering truth. Look, it's a very difficult thing. I think we all know that it's difficult when we are at odds with someone, something, whatever, and we are almost intimidated to bring our truth forward because we don't want to create waves, and we don't want to annoy someone more than they're probably annoyed. But you mentioned something that happened just yesterday or the day before, when in a situation you got up and spoke your truth. And I applaud that, because it was a very tense situation and a difficult situation to speak your truth. But I don't think it was necessarily just your truth. It was a truth for a combined goal of a group. It what they all came together to accomplish. And so, having heard it again, it was raw for many people, because truth is always raw when we're not willing to accept that that's where we're going. But at the end of the day, if we really take pause, we know that that's where we're going, and that is truth. So that too is yajna. But also, what is not yajna is to force our truth to others who are not in the way ready in their own journey to accept that.
Yeah, I think it would be really good to talk a little bit about, if I'm using yajna or sacrifice as one of the virtues of, say, of being service to humanity, to the world. What is not yajna? One of the things that you just mentioned is we cannot force our own beliefs onto others, and that is not yajna. I mean, in some ways, this is also interesting that sacrifice is here. You're not sacrificing anything to change the other person.
No.
You're sacrificing something in you so that you actually can see that everyone is happy, or everything around us.
Yes, and
is
we've
in
been
harmony.
talking about practices that are ritual practice, but they're nature organically ritual practice. They're not necessarily spiritual practices.
Yes.
These are just organic to the composition and the condition and character of our Mother Nature. And so it goes to all tradition, all religion, all belief systems, all any system that we all have in each of our tradition a way to help someone else. And yes, that can be selfless, and but sacrifices go beyond. Yajna is beyond just being selfless, just handing money over to an organization that needs help, or clothing or food or whatever to people who need it. That's excellent. That's an act of kindness. Kindness is part of yajna. But the deeper value of yajna goes way beyond kindness. It goes beyond where the self is first, but the self is defined as the one, the entirety. The well-being of all is number one. And as we contribute to that well-being, certainly we are going to be taken care of as well. There is no lack of self-love there.
Yeah.
It is just not putting ourselves as the ego number one. It is saying that I will give something that is of value to me, to the other, or to many others. And it's not necessarily money, although it's good to give donations, but it's giving part of our own energy that comes from the 5 elements of our limbs. These fingers are all the 5 elements course through them. And so if we are to bring our bodies and our minds and our good spirit to the aid of whatever it is we are doing, that's also yajna.
This reminds me of something that my parents did in their life. I think it's a very common practice amongst certain parts in India. My parents, when they first went to a pilgrimage to Varanasi, my parents were living in South India, and from Varanasi they went to Allahabad, which is where I think Kumbh Mela, which is a very
one
big
of the major
gathering,
Kumbh Melas happen there from time to time.
And I mean, they didn't go to Kumbh Mela, but they went to this place, Allahabad, where the river Ganga, Ganges flows. And when they came back from the pilgrimage, I asked my mom and dad, what did you do? They said they gave up eating guava fruit for the rest of their life. And I said, what? You went all the way to Allahabad
To give up guava.
to give up guava, and we have such huge produce of guava fruits at home, and we have got beautiful garden with guava fruits. Why did you do that? And that's when my parents told me that is a form of yajna, is what we really love and what we really want. If we take a vow to say, actually, I'm not going to have it anymore because I want others to have it.
Yes.
and that's a form of
That is the selfless.
yajna.
That is yajna.
So that's what you're saying is like what matters to me most, what I like most, if I'm able to bring myself to give up so that others can
Yes.
benefit from it.
Right. Right.
You know, these are not just symbolic. I think these are a little bit like how to bring about behavioral change.
All pilgrimages are based on yajna.
Mm.
For every tradition, it is based on yajna. To exert the effort that it takes to get there by foot.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, when I walked around during Kartik Deepam in Tirunelveli or Arunachala, everyone would know where this is because it's where Ramana Maharishi went when he was at the age of 16, that enlightened avatar. And in this incredible place, there are many goshalas there, by the way, where the cows are so beautifully treated. But during Kartika Deepam, which is a huge, imagine a vessel, a brass vessel with 750 gallons of pure ghee and a 32-yard long wick, a cotton wick, lit on the top of the hill so that this incredible tejas, this light can illumine and bring its prayer to an entire valley of thousands and thousands of people. It was so beautiful. But what we did was we noticed that everyone was walking with barefoot.
Mm.
And the earth was not kind there because there's lots of refuge and sticky things and muddy things and, the tracks of some concrete pavements and all the mix, the whole incredible mix. And it was painful to go barefoot as a Western, as a person brought up in comfort in the West. And yet we saw millions of disciples, perhaps thousands in a day, that would walk barefoot. And that is just to feel Mother Earth. That is just to say, for these days or this time that I'm taking the perambulation around the sacred mountain, I shall not, I will not wear my shoes upon your face.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. So these are all intending to be yajna.
It is. So we are almost coming to the end of our webinar.
Mm-hmm.
And Maya Tiwari, I think, because yajna or this kind of sacrifice not because we don't want it or it's difficult, because we choose to exercise that sacrifice in a way to thank nature, who or she sacrifices all the time.
And to forgive ourselves for
To
unwittingly
Yes.
doing the things we do, because we're all complicit in Mother Nature's oppression in one way or another.
In a way, it's even a superior virtue than tolerance.
Yes, tolerance is implies that we don't like that, but we will tolerate it. It is sort of a little bit condescending, actually. Although I'm sure it's not meant in that way.
Yes.
But Richard, there's really one very important thing that I want to add in closure, and that is yajna in its absolute deepest form is the relationship that we have with Mother Earth, in that when we are going through immense challenges, disease, absolute despair, I'm not talking about a light disease like whatever, muscle ache or cold. I'm talking about deep transformations in our lives. If we can get to the point where we understand pain as sharing Mother Nature's pain, that's really the most powerful yajna that we as humans can perform. When the pain is no longer an individualized, personalized, emotionalized, psychic relationship pain, but when it is now, it's not that we are offering our pain back to Mother Earth, because God knows she has a lot of pain, but we're saying, okay, Mother, I am going to be imbibing some of your pain inside of me. I'm already imbibing all this pain, and I'm devoting that. I am saying that this is this is, I hope this helps you.
Yes.
I hope I'm imbibing some of it for you. I hope I'm sharing in that as well. I think it takes us out of a place that can be the abyss of not getting well. So I wanted to share that.
No, that's beautiful. And interestingly, with some other values, wherein say, let's say ahimsa as well, others can actually recognize when we exercise ahimsa. Whereas, but very interestingly, when it comes to yajna, because yajna is a sacrifice that you do with no pride, or you don't want others to know of your
It's
yajna.
an anonymous thing. Actually.
It's anonymous in the sense only when someone is very sensitive, they recognize the yajna that the other person is doing in their everyday life.
Let me put it this way: our mothers have made so many yajnas, millions of yajnas by the time we become teenagers.
Yes, exactly. So, so yajna is an important virtue within the multitude of how to exercise ahimsa, and hopefully we will be able to talk more about the vast spectrum of the application of ahimsa from its Vedic traditions to how it applies to our everyday modern living. Thank you so much, Maya Tiwari.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vijay Murthy. Yes.
And I do suggest that you visit Wise Earth School website or Maya Tiwari's website to
It's
learn.
wiseearth.com.
It's
www.wiseearth. Two E's.
It's important to remember there are two E's.
Wiseearth.com.
Once again, thank you so much, Maya Tiwari, and I hope this webinar has given all of us something else to look at in the application of ahimsa.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you too.
Yes. Namaste.